Welcome, Wargamers, to the filth-ridden war camps of the mortal realms, because today we are talking about the Rotbringers, those mortal forces of the plague god Nurgle, as we continue our exploration of the Maggotkin of Nurgle through their newest battle tome. These guys collectively exemplify the faction, in my opinion. They are slow, tough as nails, and they spread disease wherever they go, with a merry smile and joy in their sunken, jaundiced eyes. Now, one thing I'd like to add up top, if you like this video and you're interested in this faction, please consider subscribing here on the channel. I have playlists for a whole bunch of different Age of Sigmar lore things, everything from important events in the timeline to covering in-depth factions like this. So if you're not already a member, please join along. We're going to have ourselves a great time. Now, for those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar or the Maggotkin of Nurgle, we began our recent coverage of Nurgle by talking about the Grandfather himself, a being in the realm of chaos that represents both despair, but also the cycle of entropy and decay that often brings things in the mortal world to that despair. And from that video, you, like many people, may be wondering, why on earth would any person want to worship Nurgle? You know, that's fair. You kind of swell up, you get all these terrible diseases inflicted upon you, everyone's all fat and chonky, and why would you ever want that as a life? And so in this video, we're going to aim to answer that question. These are the mortal forces of Nurgle after all. But what makes this kind of hard to answer is that there are actually so many ways that people in the mortal realms end up in the service of Nurgle. And so let's hammer out a few, and we'll talk about the Rotbringers as a whole, regardless of how they got there. Firstly, I want to touch on the fact that mortals can be tortured into submission, and we actually have a great example of this in the lore. We have a champion named Torglug, who we meet in the Realmgate Wars, kind of the first major campaign in Age of Sigmar, who was a champion of Nurgle who basically his whole job was to be the main hunter of Alariel, as she and the Stormcast Eternals who were trying to save her did a merry chase across Ghyran. Well, Torglug began as a mortal who fought against the Nurgle forces back in the Age of Chaos, but he was captured, tortured, thrown into what's called a filth pit, which is essentially like a desecration site for Nurgle forces. Kind of think of it as like a torture chamber where their body is assailed by all kinds of horrific diseases and mutations all at once. And so after an extended period of time, this hero's will was sapped and he finally submitted, coming out of the pit as a follower of Nurgle. And we can look at that and be like, okay, that makes sense that they had to break him body, mind, and spirit, but why would somebody choose this, right? Not about being forced into submission or coerced, but choose it willingly. Well, Nurgle first entered the realm of Ghyran not with an army, but with blessings. People in the mortal realms, even before the Age of Chaos, had enemies and dangers and natural disasters to contend with. You know, for example, drought can be potentially devastating in many isolated communities, and that happens all the time, regardless of any chaos forces. And so when farmers pray for rain, who should be so happy but to grant them that gift other than Nurgle? Sure, the rain's a little weird, kinda yellow, but you know, hey, whatever, stuff's growing, we're taking what we can get. In fact, there's multiple occasions where Nurgle simply answers people's prayers, something that the good gods in the Pantheon failed to do. And once a community has received his blessings, things ramp up very, very fast, and it gives Nurgle a foothold. All of a sudden, the town can slowly be corrupted, and I say slowly kind of in quotes, but it can happen pretty quickly as well. Now, another common example is escape from disease itself. Let's say you contract a deadly flesh-eating disease up your leg, right? The odds are not looking good. You've been to healers and priests and all these kinds of things, and you might call out to the gods for salvation, and one voice answers. And it simply says, "Serve me, and I'll take away the pain of your ailment." And so, like, obviously, yeah, absolutely, that's what I want. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you bind yourself to the service of Nurgle. Now, be mindful about what that promise was. I'll take away the pain of your ailment. The pain goes away, but not the disease. And you continue to rot and be sick, but all of a sudden, you don't mind it. Again, you feel blessed and blissful. Not to mention, you could have just been raised in one of the thousands upon thousands of chaos tribes that revere some partial or imperfect version of Nurgle, like the God of Rain, the Cycle of Life. There's all kinds of other names for him besides Nurgle, where people worship these, quote unquote old gods without actually knowing the deity that they're serving. And so you're just kind of raised with a belief in him. My point is, there's a myriad of ways to end up as a Rotbringer. None of them are particularly nice, but they are like many different avenues, and the grandfather always has a seat at his table available for you. Regardless of how you got there, there's much more going on here than just a bunch of sick people looking for a fight. Because they really, whenever you do make that turn of, being a mortal who chooses Nurgle, you really do have a mental and spiritual shift as well. To the Rotbringers, entropy, decay, and disease are not only, not bad, but they're active blessings. All things die, all things fail. But instead of fighting against it, you can rejoice in the limited time that you have. Share your limited time in these realms, freeing others from the pain of their mortal coil. Inflict disease upon others so that they may see their own finality and call out to the grandfather as well. In this worldview shift, every virus, disease, or pox becomes a personal invitation to join Nurgle. He is a gracious and benevolent god, and like I said, there's always a seat open at his table, and he's happy to take away the pain of your finite existence. Again, it's feeding into that despair. He's looking to bring the mortal realms to a point where they cherish his greatness, to be free from the ravages of entropy by being the ones who deliver it. Of course, this means that the Rotbringers can have a highly positive outlook despite looking truly horrific and disgusting, and so that's the mindset and a few possible origins. But even within that, there's a huge spectrum of personalities that can be created. And actually, one resource that I want to point people towards is an old series that came out during the Realmgate Wars. It's called Call of Archaeon. It was a series of short books that came out, I believe it was for a Christmas bundle. And one of those books kind of follows the tale of this Nurgle warband. Essentially, one of the heroes in that warband has been summoned by a Gaunt Summoner, as he's a champion that might just be the guy that Archaeon wants to join as a Varangard. And it's all about his, trials and tribulations as he tries to achieve this. So I'm not going to give any spoilers, but what I will say is it's a great resource because you do get a sense of what different personality types are. Some are much more martial-minded. Oh yeah, we need to be out conquering. Why? Because that's what Chaos Warbands do, cue metal riff. Whereas some other characters are like, no, we can go slow. Why? Because the grandfather is not in a rush. It's about spreading the garden. It's about growing influence, corrupting things over time and entropy. There is no rush, because time means nothing to him. And so you get to see different perspectives and worldviews and personalities. Some are much more jovial, some are much more serious, and there's this whole spectrum within there. Now, I want to end this video talking about why I think these guys are cool. And to be perfectly honest, I have mentioned this before in other videos, I love Mortal Nurgle stuff, because more so than any other Chaos faction, I think they are an interesting mirror of human emotions, or I should say rather a mockery of it. Sure, rage, indulgence, and secrets are equally understandable actions and emotions, that being from Khorne and Slaanesh and Tzeentch respectively, but there's just something about this kind of hopelessness and kind of the gaze that you get when you stare into the void and think about your own finality, with the desperation that follows, that is so uniquely human. And I mean, of course, when I say human, I mean for us, the reader, not within the setting. This stuff affects elves and dwarves and all that kind of stuff too. How many of us are in pain and would do anything for a release from it? How many are swallowed by sadness at our own finite nature and want purpose more than anything? A task to do, a pain relieved, and a freedom that we can then go and share with others and kind of be the hero of the story. I reckon a whole lot of us. But of course, all those things are great and deeply part of the human experience, but when you twist and pervert it into a weapon, it becomes something that is truly scary. It goes from trying to talk to people out of a false hope, meaning I don't want you to believe in, Sigmar, the Sigmarite church, because they're lying to you, which largely they probably are, into destroying it. I am going to take your hope in that church away by annihilating it. Again, it's weaponizing. I don't want you to have this false hope, but the twist is when it becomes militant and angry and corruptive and aggressive. I'm going to take it from you. And the whole goal is to put others into positions where they themselves are desperate and scared and need to call out to anything that will listen to salvation. And that salvation, meaning Nurgle's blessings, is just as false of a hope as whatever the heck they ripped away from you in the first place. It's all super messed up. But in this way, we see a whole bunch of characters, taken to an extreme, like a cartoonish extreme, of dealing with these concepts of hopelessness and despair. Seeking anything from a refuge from either how small they are, like individually, like they just have no impact or no meaning, they're looking for something to value them, and of course Nurgle always does, to conquering warlords who just want power. And of course, as a chaos deity, Nurgle's happy to provide. He's happy to infuse champions with his power, and he can go out and have, huge conquesting armies and all that kind of stuff. Now, one thing I do want to end the video by talking about is that Nurgle doesn't look at champions the same way as the other chaos gods. So like Tzeentch or Khorne, or even Slaanesh to an extent, like they can look at their followers, at least the mortal side, and be like, okay, you are good, at least a good servant, because of the amount of pain and devastation and corruption or whatever, insert whatever they like to do, on the mortal realms. But Nurgle's a bit different because when he evaluates his followers, it's not necessarily about conquering, it's not about war, it's about how have you grown the garden? How many people have you brought into the fold? Like, it's much more like laid back in a sense of just, the garden will grow because it's disease, it just runs rampant, it spreads like wildfire, and so if you tend the garden well, and his blight kind of crosses the entire realm, you will do better as a person who does that and never lifts an axe than a conquering warlord who destroys fortresses. And so that's a little bit of a different thing, and I appreciate that because, again, it's just more ways to look at all these different characters. With that all being said, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you like about the Rotbringers? Now, I was going to go in the unit by unit kind of a thing, but the truth is there's not a lot of lore for each of these units, and I already did my older videos that cover them. Nothing's changed. I just kind of wanted to refresh about the mortal forces. The truth is, you turn into a Blight King, and then you can, if you want to, take a trial to gain a fly that you ride on, or go down several of the paths and become a champion and march on your own path to glory. So I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of substance there for dedicated videos like unit by unit. That being said, I love these guys a whole lot, and I'm excited to get back to building mine. Tell me your favorite unit and why. Leave the comments down below and I will catch you there. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and please subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.